Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to review this shocking series. Rumors are swirling around the Newman family, but what's the truth? In this video, I will summarize the plot point revealed in last week's episode and offer some personality terror on the case that move to explore needs our research. Plan that could send him into legal trouble. Now let's go.
After being warned by Phyllis, Sharon decides not to remain silent any longer. She confronts Nick about his drug use and trafficking, but this time with Phyllis by his side for moral support. Nick initially denies it, but the persistence of both women, along with evidence Phyllis may have gathered, forces him to admit part of the truth, but still withholds crucial details. Phyllis didn't speak to Sharon with pity, but with a tone serious enough to shatter Sharon's last remaining defenses. It wasn't a vague premonition, nor the kind of unfounded suspicion often pushed aside by someone too much to accept the worst. The warning came like a cold, precise cut, forcing Sharon to confront something she had probably felt deep down for a long time but had never had the courage to name. The unease surrounding Nick hadn't just existed for a day, but had developed through subtle changes in his attitude, unusually prolonged silences, avoidance of eye contact, and untimely outbursts of anger. Sharon had tried to convince herself it was just pressure, fatigue, the turmoil anyone could experience. But when Phyllis, who was not easily swayed by such matters, chose to speak to her as if this were a life-or-death struggle between truth and self-deception, Sharon understood that she no longer had the right to remain silent. The decision to confront Nick didn't come to Sharon impulsively. It was more like tearing herself away from what was familiar from feelings, memories, and even the habit of protecting a man she once believed was strong enough not to fall that way. The most painful thing wasn't just the possibility of Nick's involvement with drugs, but the fact that Sharon had to ask herself, when such a chasm of concealment had appeared between them, that she no longer recognized the man before her. Her disappointment didn't erupt into anger immediately. It quietly accumulated, thickening layer by layer, heavy as the air before a storm, making each breath difficult. She didn't want to believe it, but she couldn't continue to pretend not to see. There are times when silence isn't a sign of love, but rather complicity in destruction. Sharon understood that all too well, and that understanding hurt her more than any confession that might follow. Sharon initiated it quietly, without drama, but her resolve was sharper than anger. She didn't beat around the bush, nor did she allow herself to fall into the trap of begging for a comforting answer. Her disappointment and anxiety had gone too far to be masked by vague questions. Sharon confronted Nick with all the hurt of someone who had tried to trust, with the belated realization of someone who finally understood they couldn't save anyone by pretending everything was all right. She forced herself to stand firm against Nick's reaction, because she knew that if she showed even a little weakness, he would seize that opening to deny, to evade, to make her feel like she was imagining things again. Nick reacted exactly as Sharon and Phyllis had anticipated. He denied it almost immediately, with a sharpness that not only refuted the accusation, but also dominated the space, forcing the other woman to back down. Nick displayed the discomfort of someone whose unseen wound had been touched, but also the aggression of someone desperately trying to maintain control. This transformed the confrontation from a painful conversation between once close friends into a struggle between truth and self-defense. Nick tried to divert the issue, to turn Sharon's anxieties into a misunderstanding, to make Phyllis's warning seem ill-intentioned interference. In that moment, he not only denied his actions, but also seemed to deny the two women's right to know the truth. But Sharon didn't back down. Perhaps it was because she had suffered so much that she no longer feared further pain. She looked directly at Nick's denial and sensed something stirring beneath the surface of his anger. She knew Nick well enough to recognize when he was using anger to mask panic. If before Sharon could have been consumed by guilt, wondering if she had been too harsh, now she felt only a chill in her heart. Not because she had stopped loving him, but because love had now been forced to transform into determination. She spoke to Nick with all the frustration of someone who had seen the signs too clearly to be led astray by excuses any longer. Her worrying wasn't just his use of drugs, but the greater darkness behind it, something he was trying to keep hidden at all costs. For Phyllis, this moment wasn't simply about feeling she was right. There was a heavy weight in the way she watched Sharon confront the truth. Though always stronger and more practical than her fiery exterior suggested, Phyllis understood the immense emotional cost Sharon was paying. Sometimes, those standing beside her in such moments are drawn into a different kind of pain, the pain of witnessing a collapse they can't bear. The pain of knowing they need to remain strong while the person beside them is on the verge of collapse. Phyllis's support didn't end when Nick left. It continued through her presence, preventing Sharon from falling apart amidst a sea of unanswered questions. The most haunting aspect of that confrontation was the feeling that Nick had confessed but hadn't truly opened his heart. The truth should have set people free, but half-truths only distorted things. Sharon understood that from now on, she could no longer see the signs from the past in the same way. Every small change in Nick's past now emerges like a puzzle piece that, when placed in the right place, makes the picture far more terrifying. Phyllis understands this, so the look she gives Sharon isn't simply one of worrying, but also a reminder that they must be prepared for what remains to be revealed. The real battle may not be in today's confrontation, but in the days to come, when the truth gradually emerges from the shadows and forces everyone to face consequences that no one can deny. From a fair perspective, perhaps Nick's tragedy lies not only in his wrongdoing, but also in the mental isolation that led him to consider concealment as a survival instinct. But sympathy, however it exists, cannot erase the harm he caused. A person can be drowning in crisis yet still be held responsible for the choices they make during that crisis. Sharon understands this, and perhaps that is the most bitter lesson in the whole affair. Loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing the truth to keep them intact in your eyes. Sometimes, loving someone means daring to see them in their worst version, even if it breaks your heart. When things calmed down, leaving only Sharon and Phyllis in the heavy silence, the overwhelming feeling wasn't victory or resolution, but the beginning of a darker chapter. Sharon knew she couldn't go back to her state before this meeting. She had crossed the line of doubt to confront reality, and once that happened, one can no longer feign innocence. Phyllis also knew that from now on, any wrong step could drag Nick deeper into trouble or cause Sharon to collapse under the weight of the next truth. The atmosphere around them was no longer just tense, but a prolonged, simmering tension, slow but persistently destructive. In your opinion, should Sharon trust Nick one more time? The plot is becoming increasingly dramatic. Once the police investigate, he could face a life sentence if he's found guilty of drug trafficking. The most painful aspect isn't the initial shock, but the way the story forces characters who were once close to each other to confront each other, people who both want to save and hurt each other at the same time. Sharon is stronger when she doesn't remain silent. Phyllis is more valuable when she sets aside her complexities to become a support system at the right time, and Nick, in his own turmoil, serves as a reminder that downfall rarely begins with a big crash, but often stems from avoiding the truth until it becomes overwhelming. What makes this segment so impactful isn't its noise, but its humanity, full of fear, conflict, hurt, and unfillable voids. And perhaps that's why it leaves such a sad, very real aftertaste, as if after everything that just happened, no one really leaves unscathed. Spoilers from the Young and the Restless show that Nick may continue to dig his own hole, so stay tuned. On our channel, I always seek content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, hypothesizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objectives, and interesting perspectives. What are you waiting for to happen to Lily in the next episode of the series? Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.